I'm Carson Wittwer.
I'm Reilly Giunta, and today we're going to be talking to you about famous vehicle recalls and the ethics behind them.
What we're going to do is we're going to walk around the building here. We're at Duncan Imports and Classic Cars. We'll walk around a few cars. We're going to give you examples of famous recalls. We're going to talk a little bit about what they entailed and then what the companies did to handle them. You're standing by all these Honda Beats here today. Talk to you a little bit about a famous Honda recall. One that also encompassed a lot more companies. Pretty famous recently, the Takata airbag recall. What happened with Takata airbags, so when the airbag inflates, there's an igniter in it. In certain climates, in very humid climates, Hawaii, Florida, they would start to rust and corrode, and then when the airbags would go off, the inflator would turn into shrapnel, basically. Honda had this majorly go on. They're a big buyer of Takata airbags, but there's 17 other brands that were included in this recall. Honda had the most cars, so they're most notorious with it. So when we're looking at this Takata airbag recall, one of the big things that went awry with it is that the companies knew about it back in 2004, Takata and Honda both, but they didn't bring it up until the NHTSA brought it up in 2014. So that was a big problem that they were handling. They knew about this, and it was a big safety concern. They matched up 11 deaths to the airbag recalls. So, one of the ways they could have better handled this is, better testing both on the part of Honda and the companies that use the airbags, but also, on the part of Takata. You need both suppliers and the end product to be testing these products.
Today I'm going to talk to you about the Chevy Corvair. Unfortunately, we don't have any Corvairs, so there's Novas left to do. But the Corvair is one of the most infamous cars among people. It's infamous because GM designed the car without an anti-roll bar and without a camber compensator. So what would happen is people would drive the car, and if they went through a corner too fast, it would cause the rear tire to tuck, and therefore it would spin out, and people would get injured. There'd be a bunch of accidents. And unfortunately, GM never recalled it. Instead, they just changed the design. They didn't acknowledge the fact that people were upset about it. They didn't recall the cars to fix the problem. They just changed the design to include an anti-roll bar. Now, this is an issue because a lot of people were out of money. They wrecked their cars and they got injured, but GM didn't recognize the issue, and they considered it to be driver error. And even though, yes, someone could have corrected it as the driver, not having an anti-roll bar and a camber compensator in a car that's rear engine and rear drive can cause a real issue with stability, and can cause the rear end to kick out, which it did. And that is why Ralph Nader wrote the book about it, describing it and targeting GM. Unfortunately, other car manufacturers did it too, but Ralph Nader didn't acknowledge their involvement.
All right, so the next recall I'm going to talk to you about today is actually, a very good one that happened very recently. Happened actually in the last couple months, but it was a good part of a company. It involved one single car in the entire world, and what's unique about it is the car is actually 26 years old. They don't even make it anymore. So Suzuki, a company that's not too famous with cars, but they make a ton of different products, issued a recall for a car from 1991, a Suzuki Cappuccino. Car not made in America, so most people haven't heard about it. They issued one recall, and it was for something that didn't really matter so much. So this is a Cappuccino here. They issued the recall for an engine block number. The engine in a certain car got replaced. They didn't have the number stamped on it. So, Suzuki saw that. They found out about it, and they recalled the car so they could get the engine block number. What that is important to the car is so they can, for the resale of the vehicle, they know it's a Suzuki part. So when they recalled the car, just a single one, they went out, found the owner, found the engine, made sure it was a correct one. They found that it did not have the engine block. They made sure to get a new engine block stamp, get a new engine block with the correct stamp on it, replace the engine, and then all was right in the world. But that was, a good situation by a good company, issuing a recall for just one single vehicle, 26 years old. Very well done by Suzuki.
Next, I'm going to talk about Mercedes. This one isn't as infamous as some of the other ones, but it is an important one to talk about because actually Mercedes didn't handle it well at all. So in the '08 to 2014 Mercedes C-Class, known as the W204, Mercedes started producing cars that they couldn't afford. They spent way too much money designing the C-Class. So for the C63, what they did is they put in cheap head bolts that what happened is over time they would corrode, and as the owners would drive it, they start to wear and then they'd shear, and the head gasket would fail, and then unfortunately the coolant would mix and it would cause the engines to seize. So owners would then obviously be upset, and they would take the Mercedes to the dealership and say, hey, you know, my car's broken, you know, give me a new one, I have warranty. And Mercedes wouldn't honor the warranty, and they actually made owners replace the motor, and the engine in the C63 is about a $30,000, you know, 6.2 liter V8. So it's really expensive, and they really didn't handle it well, and they just kind of told the owners that they'd have to suck it up and spend that 30 grand to replace the engines.
So the last recall I'm going to talk to you about today is actually one of the most famous ones for one of the worst reasons. It had a lot of people killed during it. So, you know, in the late 2000s, early 2010s, GM had the ignition switch recall. Now, the recall came out in 2014, but it affected models going back to the late 2000s, early 2010s. Now, the ignition switch recall, what it entailed is the ignition switch on GM vehicles would fail, causing the engine and the car to shut off in the car. That way, you know, when you got into a crash, the airbags would not deploy. So that's a serious problem if you got in an accident. That led to 146 recorded fatalities. Those were on the hands of GM. So this was a major recall at the time. You know, cars were coming in. They said, you cannot drive this. Do not drive your car. Bring it in. It was a very scary situation for a lot of GM owners. So when they brought it up, you know, GM, from what court documents were saying, GM knew about it for a few years. They didn't bring it up. Their engineers found out about the problem. You know, they saw the ignition switches were failing, but they said nothing about it until 2014 when the NHTSA brought it up. You know, they issued the recall, and they started to record the number of fatalities that were happening. So it went up to 146. You know, that is blood on the hands of GM on a very important recall. You know, that affected consumers, and you know, it led to costing a lot of lives and millions of dollars that GM had to pay out. But it doesn't take into account the loss of 146 lives. So, you know, it's something that GM needed to get ahead of. You know, they saw it was coming, they knew their ignition switches were failing, and so they needed to issue this recall sooner.
Lastly, I'm going to talk about the Toyota recall with the Land Cruisers and the FJ Cruiser. This is an FJ40, it's not the one that got recalled, but the mid-2000s Toyota Land Cruisers and the FJ Cruiser were recalled because the B-pillar was faulty and it wasn't structurally sound. So what would happen is people would roll their Land Cruisers or their FJ Cruisers, and the B-pillar would actually crush. Now, this is more serious in an FJ Cruiser. Speaking from someone who owns one, what happens is it has suicide doors, so the front door opens and then the rear door opens the opposite way. Now, if the B-pillar crushes, the door can't open, so what would happen is people would get trapped in the back of the car if anything were to happen, and therefore, I mean, no one died, but it caused panic. Mine actually had to go back to get the whole door and B-pillar replaced, both the doors, because both of them connect. So it's a real huge thing, but Toyota handled it fantastically. The moment they found out about the issue, they recalled the FJ Cruiser and they recalled the Land Cruiser, and they got them replaced and they fixed them. Now with the Land Cruiser, it was a little bit different. They actually, a lot of situations, you just kind of had to give them money and buy the cars back because you can't really replace the B-pillar in a car like that. But in the FJ Cruiser, it's super easy. You just replace the two doors. So Toyota did a great job. Made me love my FJ Cruiser even more and love these guys too.
Hey, thanks for watching our video on automotive recalls.
And now it's time for us to go back to the future.